newsletter. And I'm here today with a special co host today, Cindy Green. And our special guest today is Mike McGirr. And Cindy, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself. And then, of course, we'll turn it over to Mike here in a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. My name's Cindy Green, and I am a candidate for House of Delegates for District 44, which consists of all of Bristol, all of Washington County, and two-thirds of Russell County. And I'm excited to be here with my volunteer campaign manager, who has walked the walk with me throughout my campaign, and I really am excited to continue the discussion about him running for chair of Rural Caucus. So, Mike, what made you decide to run for Rural Caucus chair?
Well, in short, yeah. And in long form, once we really dug in and we started to see the dysfunction that we were dealing with, in at first it was just, in the little part of the house, and then it was we went out of field, right, and we actually were in the presence of the current chair, and I was stunned that this was a person who was supposed to be helping candidates when all they did was sit at the other end of the table and talk over their candidate and gossip with their friends. So when I found out what that was, and that the opportunity to make that type of a change was possible, yeah, it just made sense. It just made perfect sense for an opportunity to bring resources that I know that we all deserve, that I know that you deserve, that all the candidates deserved, and that they didn't get. It was just a roadblock and or a log jam, I guess, more of a log jam. Yeah.
Sure. And so, can you explain to the folks here what is Rural Caucus chair and what is the Rural Caucus?
The Rural Caucus is across the entire Commonwealth, as are all of the issue caucuses, right? So we've got a central committee that's made up of the chairs from all the congressional districts. And then it's also includes all of the chairs of the caucuses, which are the issues. So there's the Women's Caucus, the African American Caucus, the LGBTQ Caucus, other Veterans Caucus, right? And then there's Rural Caucus.
Mhm.
Rural, I think, is one of the richest opportunities to make a large impact across the Commonwealth, because the majority of the state is rural, and these voices are not making it through the channels back up to Richmond. They're not making it through effectively to convey what it is that we actually want in Southwest, what we actually want in Southern side. These words don't penetrate the Richmond elite, and they need to. They need to have somebody who's going to be able to arrive with data, that is going to arrive with verified words with numbers behind them, so that we can start to advocate for the things that we actually need.
Go ahead, Cindy. Go right ahead.
Was going to say, as a rural candidate myself running in a red district, I know there was a total of 27 of us. And because the state did not feel like we had a chance to win in our races, we did not receive any support from the state party. So we were pretty much on our own, and we tried to band together and tried to share tips and such with each other. But having Mike as my volunteer chair, campaign chair, I had a resource that I just felt like it would be so helpful for these other 26 rural candidates to have access to somebody that knows how to do marketing, that could help them in identifying which billboards would be the most effective, which, getting radio spots recorded. I was just so fortunate to have him that I think having that on the whole state, so that all the rural candidates would have access to that type of expertise, it would be a game changer, and we wouldn't just be trying to do this by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think I thank you for saying that. And yeah, the experience is what continues to drive me to get this work done, and to attain, the chair position, because as you described, the state party doesn't provide support to candidates that they don't believe are going to win. And by support, that's not just the billboard or the technical aspects of it, right? It's also the financial. I mean, how much money did you get from the state party?
Yeah.
Zero, zero.
Oh,
And so it's just bonkers that, we've got candidates who are standing up and pulling in real numbers. Like you broke 40% in one precinct, you broke 33% in several precincts. And, these are not numbers to sniff at. Like this is the first run after 2011, right? Against one of the most powerful Republicans in the state. And you garnered over a quarter of the vote in most places. So,
But let me
I
let me
think,
give you a little bit of historical prospect. I've been involved in politics, not in the party, but involved in local politics for a long time. Years ago, I was on the board of supervisors in Wise County. And give you, for example, I grew up when the coal fields, talking about Wise, Dixon, Buchanan County, down into Lee County, Democrats would win 60-40, 70-30. And now when we talk about needing help, to flipped over 100%. Now Republicans win 80-20 in a lot of counties, 70-30. And so that's rural Virginia now. Mike, got a quick question. I had a great privilege of writing an article in the Rural Route newsletter about you. Can you give me a little bit of your resume? Because let me tell you, it's quite impressive. Let's know about it and some of the work you've done in your lifetime and your career.
So I was very fortunate. I do want to predicate this with, both my parents are Appalachian. So, but they fled in 1959 and they went for better jobs. They were the first to graduate from high school. They were the first to attend high school in their family. And, then my dad even got a higher degree. He got a
Mhm.
BA from Mount Union College in Alliance, Ohio. And then he was recruited by the Travelers Agency, right? So insurance company.
And I used to be an agent for them years ago.
You may have worked for my dad, depending. So yeah, my dad ended up becoming the, senior vice president of sales. And
Wow.
so, nationally. And then he was recruited and we moved up to New England when I was about 7. And, I was fortunate that my parents understood the value of education. And at the time, the incredible value of public education, right? And so they chose a town they was in the top 10% of the school districts in Massachusetts. Like that's how they selected the town. And, I ended up going to Rochester Institute of Technology for
Mhm.
graphic design and print management. And I learned all the processes around photography and reproduction services and all the different forms of printing, design. And we did all of that in the analog, right? Film, paper, right? Lots of metal, hot
Old
metal,
school.
right?
Old school.
Yeah. But at the same time was the digital advent. And so we were the alphas and the betas on what's now Photoshop and what's now, things like Canva. They didn't exist. Like we were learning all the digital stuff at the same time that we were learning the analog, which was really great. So when I graduated into a lousy economy, a horrible job market.
What year was that, Mike? What year did you graduate?
91 was when I received my degree. So I was there for 5 years.
I graduated Virginia Tech 1991, so I know the job market.
Yeah, right? I mean, thanks, George Bush. So it was, it was a really rough time. And I ended up getting what was amazing was like my education being that transitional education time. I was able to get hired into a company that I'd done piecework for as a teenager from
Mhm.
my bedroom. I used to do hand-drawn color separations. I actually did the inauguration pattern for Ronald Reagan's second election.
Wow.
So I did that on my desk on a light box at night, one color at a time for the China pattern and all that. So I went back to those people and I'm like, hey, I can help you digitize your art department. And they're like, what? And, I'm like, so I ended up working with them to help to translate their art department into an Apple environment and to bring in the right equipment to be able to start to do this work in a digital capacity instead of just in the manual capacity. And that launched my career into working in color separation and color management, which doesn't sound all that exciting, but it's basically making sure that all the products in your brand have a visually exact color. And when you're reproducing across different types of formats and on different materials, it's really challenging to keep that together. And that kind of worked me into the advertising industry. And I ended up running production facilities and digital studios. We stood up a lot of digital studios around San Francisco and New York. And I ended up running the distribution for AT&T Wireless National
Wow.
campaign, a huge account. It was a nightmare of a job, but we produced everything that went into every newspaper across America. Every day there would be a new code that needed to be sent out to all the newspapers and to all the billboards and to all the magazines. Everywhere you would see AT&T Wireless, that was coming through our shop. And then eventually I did some other national brand advertising for Levi's and Dockers and Gap and for Ann Taylor Corporation. And then I just didn't like it anymore. And fortunate for me, I had the opportunity to be able to shift careers. And so I just kind of transitioned out of the industry in a fiery crash, really. And I jumped into the food system and started becoming, a private event chef and eventually cooking for people like the Turner family in Atlanta and a lot of their very high value clientele and friends. And that really got me into food systems. Working in rural spaces, I could peel off money from them in farms and at farmers markets and make agreements and start relationships. It's hard to do it as a transplant, right? I'm this gay Yankee who's coming down to the farmers market in East Point, and it's like I want to make an arrangement with you for a regular delivery of hogs. They don't know me from Adam, so it's like, what if I pay for all this in advance?
Hmm.
So I started working with farms in a 6-hour radius of Atlanta for many years, delivering a lot of those products and those heritage products that were not making the actual market in
Hmm.
Atlanta into the restaurants, into the fine restaurants, into some of the smaller restaurants. And it really just gave me a passion for rural people and for people who spoke like my family spoke and who had values like my family had.
You mean we
And
speak funny? You mean we speak different? I never heard
well,
that.
you might want to wash that wash, but I don't know.
Y'all? Okay.
Oh. And actually, by moving around the country as much as I did with my family, I became kind of a mimic. And so
Mhm.
my diction changes depending on where I am. I don't do it on purpose. It just happens. What am I hearing? It echoes back. That's the type of work that I've done. The last piece of my career was I ran a strategic partnerships for a gigantic government grant for farmer and rancher suicide prevention. And so I spent 4 years developing rural networks across the 13 southern states, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands to deliver resources, to develop well researched resources,
Mhm.
to connect rural communities with university systems in their area so that they could get the resources that they were deserving, and to make sure that people were ground proofing and vetting the quality
Mhm.
of the services that we were putting up on the call list and up on the national call line. Because the last thing we wanted to do was to give a referral to a farmer in need who might be, let's say, minority, and would go into a USDA or an FDA or a John Deere office or a farm credit office and not knowing how they're going to be treated by the staff that was in that space was a great concern. So we enlisted graduate students to go out and test out the spaces so that we would know that we had a verified quality response available to the people that were going to be calling while they're in need.
I tell you what, Mike, I got one follow-up question, then I'm gonna hand the ball over to Cindy. Talked a lot about your private sector work, but one of the first times we talked, and you clicked in my heart because when we started talking about campaigning in rural Virginia,
Mhm.
you and you'll remember this. We had a long conversation about campaigning in the 21st century is about branding now.
Yeah.
I mean, the old school of what we used to do in the 20th century, I mean, that's a thing of the past. Here in rural Virginia, especially Southwest Virginia, we had this little thing that came along in 2003, 2004, Enzico. And then, of course, the whole world knows about Mega and that movement in 2016. And that's not traditional campaigning, that is branding. And of course, with your career in advertising, and that's one reason we clicked very quickly on what needs to be done in rural Virginia. So let's talk a little bit about your political experience.
Sure. Well, in Southwest Virginia, it just screams for organization, and it also needs some clear differentiation. The issue that I really felt and what made it so easy to work with Cindy, one, her name is a brand. I mean, for crying out loud, her name is Green. And it was this opportunity to differentiate herself from both sides of the fence, right? And we know what rural America is like. We truly know it because it's people on both sides of the fence. They talk across the fence, right? They might not agree with each other, but they're neighbors, and you rely on people when you live in rural spaces in a different way that you rely on people when you're in an urbanized space or in a suburban space. And I think that making sure that people understood that she was something different than what they'd heard before, all those empty promises, that have, resulted in like some of the worst economic disasters. My God, the housing crisis. We're actually we're at the governor's housing conference in Roanoke right now because we're working in housing, because it's the most important need for stabilizing our population and helping our rural communities to stay in place for their future generations. There isn't enough housing. We have like a 5,000 house deficit just in the Tri-Cities area,
Yes.
and that's contemporary. That's a measure that was just taken by the Mount Rogers, planning district, and just completed. It's like, it's devastating to know that there are that many middle income homes that are missing from the market. And so we need to address these things incredibly. So back to your point about what is my political perspective on how this brand needed to come together to penetrate the conversation. It's a green and yellow ad campaign. I mean, it's just terrific. Her daughter designed it on Canva. I mean, just did a spectacular job. I'm like, you don't need my help on design. You need capacity, but you've got this down. It's really smart. And yeah, did it not have Democrat on it? That's true. Because the people that we were looking for were not the Democrats. The Democrats are going to vote for a Democrat when they have the opportunity the first time after 2011, as long as they know, right? And the party could have helped us with that. But instead, what we made sure that we put out there was a really clear differentiation campaign where Cindy spoke about positive activities, about what she was going to do, about how she was different than the status quo. We didn't bring up Democrat or Republican. We brought up Cindy Green, 4DA. And the consistency of that has been something that has propelled her forward. We get a lot of communications from people admiring the campaign. I mean, I've had candidates who are already filed calling me and asking me if I'll be their campaign manager. I'm like, no, I'll tell you what, you join Rural Caucus, you vote for me for chair, I will convert the Rural Caucus into your campaign manager. That's what we need to be doing. I will work with Congressional District 9, where I'm a member of that committee, and we will support that. We will make sure that we're infusing the Rural Caucus with the types of information that the CD9 is going to be able to draw down from the state.
Mhm.
And that'll be applied in rural spaces on the coast, rural spaces in far northern Virginia, rural spaces all across Southside.
One thing I didn't hear you mention was having events and fundraisers and charging candidates to attend those said fundraisers.
Oh, boy.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think Mike is the best person to make that happen. He has the skill set, he has the energy, way more energy than I have. And I think he's the best candidate for Rural Caucus chair. And hopefully, we can attach the application to the podcast, the link to how you can sign
We
up for Rural
we'll
Caucus,
do that.
because everyone that's a registered voter in Virginia can join the Rural Caucus and can vote for new leadership in the Rural Caucus.
This is something that's going to be spreading across the entire state, right?
Mhm.
So we have the opportunity to not just provide the resources, pushing resources out to people, but also to centralize a lot of the purchases that are necessary. Cindy Hayes shouldn't be out there, and Josh Utsi shouldn't be out there, and all these individual candidates who have real day jobs and not careers in
Mhm.
marketing and advertising and print and supply chain and all of that. This needs to be something that's the work of the rural chair, and that's the work of the congressional districts. We need to have them producing templates for people to work with. Of course, customize it to your own desire, customize with your own colors, your own words, but to give consistency without uniformity, right? And that allows people to really express what their brand is. I know that Yvonne Rohrer, like, there's no way she's going to market herself the way that Cindy was marketing herself, right?
Mhm.
They're very different people, and there are different qualities that are so authentic about them that need to be put on the platform, and let all the voters come on up and kick the wheels. Come on out and test what this candidate's about. But the only reason they're going to be interested is if they relate to them.
Yes.
Nobody wants to see this polished person from a far-flung part of the state come up and have this incredibly rehearsed speech that could easily have been recorded and played 150 times before. They want to actually have a dialogue with the person. Are the themes going to be the same? Sure. Are the catchphrases probably going to turn into something that's pretty consistent? Absolutely, they should, so that people can follow along and can hear the different pieces of the campaign as they approach different aspects of the need in the community or the desires of the community, right? And then on top of all of that, we need to be collecting data in a brilliant way. We need to be using the networks like the Rural Caucus to be able to push out the appropriate surveys that we know from a rural perspective need to be asked of our communities so that we can bring that information with the numbers when we go to the steering committee 4 times a year and have a substantial conversation about what the constituents are really saying, what the constituents are really needing, and what Richmond needs to be able to provide as an answer to those needs.
Well, Mike, I got one follow-up question because we got to do a shout out, and you know him personally. And I don't. I've talked to him. Is Dr. Fergie. I want you to tell what he did for us, how it's the prime example of what just a little bit of support and the difference this past election of 5 to 10% better results in rural counties throughout Virginia. And I'll
Well,
turn it over and let you, because,
hit the
yeah,
nail on that, because
Yeah.
if it hadn't been for Dr. Reed, I would not have been on the ballot. Okay. No one recruited me. He called me, asked me if I knew of anyone that would be willing to run. And I couldn't, I ran through some ideas of people, called some people, and finally I said, well, I can't find anybody. So it looks like it's going to be me. And so from that point forward, he walked me through the process of how to get my name on the ballot. No one else did that because
mhm,
no one else has that skill set here locally. And that's a shame that no one here locally has it. And it has to be someone who is from Richmond, who was born in Richmond, whose father is a civil rights icon in Richmond, but now lives in California. It's a shame that that's the resource that it took to get me on the ballot. And here I am living in Bristol. So it's ridiculous. And
Mhm.
so yeah, to say that his support has been fundamental in having me on the ballot, but in addition to that, mentoring me through the process, told me you're going to start getting phone calls. There's grifters coming. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I get a phone call, somebody wanting to be my campaign manager and said, well, you don't have money now, but the money will come. So, people just wanting to grift off of my campaign. Of course, I didn't know all this was going to happen. I've never run for office before. So you really, when you do run for office, you get a look behind the curtain and I realized 2 weeks into it, I said, I see. I thought the Republicans were our only problem. But no, we've got problems within the Democratic Party. And I think that this is where we start. We start at the local level, we get solid foundations in the local committees and with the rural caucus chair, and we build on that. So then the next person that wants to run, they're not like me. They're going to have a resource that they're not going to have to depend on somebody that lives in California because they're going to have local people that are going to be able to support them and have boots on the ground to canvass, to do postcards. We'll have that support in place. So it's sending the elevator down to the next person.
mhm.
But absolutely, if it hadn't been for Dr. Reed, I would not have been. There's, I don't know, 10 to 14 more candidates like myself.
Mhm.
There's probably more than that, that he did the same thing in different levels of support he provided. Some he recruited directly himself,
Mhm.
and then others he supported with the knowledge that he has of Virginia politics. So I'll
Mike,
let you answer.
hey, Mike.
I've
Hey,
been
Mike,
there.
I want you to hit up some of the numbers when we talk about Dr. Fergie and the support, Dr. Reed and the support, and not only tell us the numbers, tell us about the increased and better results we got from support and from Dr. Reed.
Absolutely. Well, in Southwest, like we pushed the needle 12.5 and 13% to the left consistently, in Bristol, in Russell, in Washington, right? Across the rest, you can see it wasn't quite as strong, but we made a huge impact right here. This is a great first step. And we absolutely never would have gotten there without Fergie. The guy is always available. He is always knowledgeable. He always has the right referral. He always has the confirmation of the information that you need. And it's just, he's a phenomenal resource. Saw what was happening in that we couldn't get any money to come down from the state to be able to support Cindy. And so he worked with his buddy Chagaba. They put up a 27 value pack on Act Blue.
Mhm.
He put a $135,000 goal at the top of it, which they exceeded. It ended up like 147 or something like
Something
that,
like that.
you know?
Yeah.
And so that value pack was a direct line to each of the 27 unrepresented, unsupported candidates in the state. That not a penny of overhead came out from those instant donations. The minute somebody would put $1 into that, it would be divided by 27 and sent to the campaign accounts, right? Nothing. Now, you can hear a lot of other consultants, especially some consultants out there who play some really shady business. It's just bonkers that nobody is calling on them and calling them out because they're consuming like massive amounts of overhead. The Washington County chair spent $5,100 with one of these consultants on some billboards that are appalling. We wanted no negativity. We wanted only positivity. And we wanted all of the resources to be devoted to our living candidate who was running the race. Instead, $5,100. Well, it only takes $3,900 to put up those 3 billboards. Oh, how do I know how much that was? Because we had a hold on all the billboards and I actually released them to him. But he didn't tell me he was going to put up this hate mail. It was like this big yellow highlighter. It looked like a dog whistle to the 90s, like something from like early 1990s, conspiracy people. And he named the candidate that we were opposing. Who does this? I'll tell you who does it. An elected chair who doesn't have people holding him accountable to contemporary standards, to clear communications, and to have respect for your candidate and make sure that you're following your candidate's wishes when you're putting material on the ground that is going to impact their success rate. He actually, I believe, and I don't know how to prove it with statistics, but I bet I know somebody who does. I bet those 3 billboards put a drag on her because it's garbage when you start throwing trash at people about issues that really aren't even what anybody was talking about in this campaign in these spaces. Everybody here was talking about every issue that Cindy outlined when she even just announced coming out. They want jobs. They want housing. They want health care. They want to make sure that their children have the same rights that they had when they were in the 70s. Right? These are no-brainer issues that are the core of what people really need taken care of. They don't need any more identity politics and any more screaming and poking fingers at the opposition. They do enough of bad work and enough naughty things for people to have their own opinions about them already. We're not here to trash human beings. We're here to simply say we've got the resources, we've got the drive, we've got the ethics, and we have the resources to be able to pull this together for y'all.
Now, could you imagine this past campaign if you had the financial support and the support system from real caucus to equal or match what Dr. Reed had done?
Oh, yeah.
She would have broken
it.
50% easily.
Think about the impact that would have, not only for my campaign, but the other 26 candidates that are running in rural red districts. It's just a shame. So I know people think, well, I didn't win my election on November 4th. Well, you can't flip a seat that has been neglected. Since 2011, my opponent had not had a Democrat run against him. You are not going to snap your fingers and be able to flip that seat. It's going to take work. And so no support to me was just, okay, we're moving on. We got work to do.
And well, just think about so much of Southwest Virginia and Southside Virginia. You got a whole generation out there that have never, ever even seen a Democratic candidate run for office.
That's right.
When you start talking about 10, 15 years.
Yep.
They've never seen one.
And their families have only been hearing the rhetoric that comes out of the more elite spaces in the country that denigrates the entire community. There is absolutely nothing wrong with coal country. These people are exquisite. We spend so much time with them. We've gone to their fish fries. We've gone to their food pantries. We've gone to their veterans festivals. We have never had anybody be angry with us. They always want to talk. They're always polite. These are kind, loving people who want to vote for something positive, who want to vote for the future of their children, who aren't just interested in voting to dog whistles and people attacking people's personalities and their lives. It was really evident. And I think another thing that, is really important to point out here is the amount of votes that we basically effectively whipped across these 27 challenges, right? By virtue of us having people stand up at varying degrees of success in their communities, every single one of those communities had somebody to vote for the first time. And that had an effect on Abigail, on Hashmi, on the rest of the ticket.
Yeah.
And these are basic principles that have been understood by our opponents on the Republican side since the 80s. When Karl Rove was pushing things in this direction, this is where they were going. And it's just kind of stunning to us that we can't seem to get the type of support that we need underneath our rural candidates. It's a bias, and it's got to be called out.
Well, I promised I'd keep y'all about 30 minutes and stuff, because we're going to have you back on. And there's a lot more to talk about and stuff. Appreciate y'all coming on the podcast. All y'all did have a wonderful campaign. It really was and stuff. Cindy, you're right. You don't move the dial 70 points in one election, or 80 points in our case up here in the coal fields. So
Right. What it did do is it got people energized, and we've got a coalition building now of people that are excited about what are we going to do. So we are
Yeah.
keeping this momentum going.
It was so impressive to me when I arrived in Roanoke for this conference. I got here early the night before, and I walked out my hotel door, and there was there was a political event occurring, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is. I had two separate people go, Mike McGirr. I'm like, what? It's like, that's crazy. And it turned out to be, Adam Murphy and Tracy Klotz. Eric Klotz, her husband, ran. And Adam is running for CD9 congressional district. That was shocking to me, and in the best possible way. So we're like out there selfieing, and then we went and had supper, and we got caught up on all the crazy stuff that's going on, and consultants sending ridiculous invoices claiming to have done work for people when they haven't done any work for people, wanting them to put them in their final reports to the government. And it's like, let's just make sure everybody knows about this. Let's just make sure, just let people know. And yeah. So anyway, thank you for having us on tonight, and we're excited to see you again.
Yeah, make your last pitch, what you're running for, and why they should vote for you.
Sure. I am Mike McGirr. I'm for VA. Mike McGirr for VA. And I am running for Rural Caucus Chair. You can become a member very simply. Just make sure that membership is confirmed, because a lot of people who put this form in get these communications back that say, you didn't fill in your phone number right. You didn't fill in your address right. Just do it again, please, because that's just not what's happening. And all right, so, what am I going to do? I'm going to get the deadwood out of the streams. I'm going to open those tributaries. I'm going to form a mighty river of resources, of communications, of data, and of community support.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Cindy. As always, wonderful. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.